The station floated in the dark like a city made of glass and light. Velun Prime, they called it, the seat of the Galactic Council. A place where species that had conquered stars came to argue about borders and trade routes, and who owned which patch of empty space. It was the most important place in the known galaxy, and Taesha Mwangi had never felt smaller in her life. She stood at the viewport of the docking bay, watching her shuttle lock into place with a soft hiss of pressure seals. Behind her, two aides carried data pads and wore the stiff gray uniforms of Earth's diplomatic corps. They looked nervous. Taesha did not look nervous. She had learned a long time ago that looking nervous was the fastest way to lose a negotiation before it started. She was tall, dark-skinned, with close-cropped hair and steady brown eyes that gave nothing away. She had spent 20 years in diplomacy, first in the African Union, then the United Nations, and now here, at the edge of known space, as Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Council. She had been chosen not because she was the smartest or the most experienced, but because she was the hardest to rattle. The selection committee had put her through 3 days of simulated alien contact scenarios. She had not flinched once. She would need that calm today. The council chamber was enormous. It stretched upward in a great dome of pale blue metal, with rows of seats rising in circles around a central platform. Each seat belonged to a species. There were over 60 of them. Some were tall and thin, with limbs like bent wire. Some were short and heavy, covered in plates of natural armor. Some did not have bodies at all, in any way that Taesha understood. They floated as clouds of light, or sat inside mechanical shells that translated their thoughts into sound. Every single one of them was already seated when Taesha walked in. That was the first sign that something was wrong. She had been told the session would begin at the 14th hour. She had arrived 10 minutes early. But the chamber was full, and the air buzzed with the low hum of dozens of translator devices working at once. They had started without her. Speaker Jolvan stood on the central platform. He was Rithari, one of the oldest species in the council. His body was made of something that looked like living crystal, pale blue and faintly transparent, with light moving inside him like slow lightning. He was ancient, even by Rithari standards. His voice, when he spoke, was deep and smooth, like stones rolling in a river. The motion before this council, he said, concerns the species designation of Sol 3 inhabitants, known to themselves as humans. Taesha stopped walking. Her aides bumped into her from behind. She ignored them and listened. Based on the findings of the Assessment Bureau, Jolvan continued, humanity is classified as a Class 9 nascent species. They are technologically adolescent. They have achieved faster-than-light travel only within the last 30 of their years. Their biology is carbon-based, soft-tissued, and highly fragile. They possess no natural defenses of note, no armor, no venom, no regenerative capacity beyond basic wound closure. Taesha felt her jaw tighten. She kept her face still. It is the recommendation of this body, the speaker said, that humanity be placed under protectorate status, effective immediately. Their territories will be administered by the Valkyrie hegemony. Their fleet rights will be suspended. Expansion will be limited to corridors approved by this council. This is done not as punishment, but as mercy. The galaxy is not kind to the unprepared. A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. Taesha saw heads nodding, or whatever passed for nodding among species that did not have heads. The Valkyrie delegation, a group of tall beings with dark blue skin and 4 arms, sat very straight and very still. They looked pleased. Taesha understood what was happening. This was not a welcome. This was a cage, wrapped in pretty words. She walked the rest of the way to the central platform. Her boots made sharp sounds on the metal floor. The chamber went quiet. 60 species watched her climb the steps and stand beside the speaker, who towered over her by a full meter. Ambassador Mwangi, Zolvan said, looking down at her with eyes like chips of blue ice. You have arrived. The floor is yours, if you wish to speak. I do, Taisha said. She looked around the chamber. She took her time. She met the eyes of every delegation she could, one by one. The Rithari, the Veilkori, the Keth, who were small and furred, and watched her with wide black eyes. The Drenath, whose bodies were like columns of dark smoke, held in shape by belts of metal. She let the silence stretch. I have listened to your motion, she said. Her voice was calm and clear. The translator device on her collar turned her words into 60 languages at once. I understand that you believe you are being kind. I understand that you have seen young species enter this galaxy and die. I understand that you carry those losses with you, and that you do not wish to carry ours. She paused. But I have a question. The chamber waited. You say that humans need protection. She let the words hang in the air for a moment. My question is simple. From whom? The silence that followed was different from the one before. The first silence had been polite. This one was confused. Zolvan tilted his great crystalline head. I do not understand the question, Ambassador. It is a simple question, Taisha said. You wish to protect us. Protection requires a threat. So I am asking you, who is the threat? Name it. The galaxy itself is the threat, said the Valkyrie delegate, rising from his seat. His name was Commander Drell, and he spoke with the clipped precision of a soldier. The Sitherax swarms, the hollow nebula, rogue machine intelligences, gravitational anomalies, radiation storms. You are soft creatures from a small world. You do not know what is out here. Taisha looked at him. She did not blink. Thank you, Commander, she said. I will remember that assessment. She turned back to the full chamber. Before this council votes on whether to cage my species, she said, I would like to formally request that humanity be allowed to submit its record to the archive. Our full record, our complete history, as is our right under council law. Zolvan hesitated. The law was clear. Any species under review had the right to submit evidence. He could not refuse. Granted, he said. Taisha nodded once. She stepped down from the platform and walked back to her seat. Her aides stared at her. She sat down, folded her hands in her lap, and waited. She had asked her question. Now the council would learn the answer. The data upload took 11 minutes. 11 minutes for the entire history of the human species to pass through a fiber optic cable and settle into the memory banks of the council's archive. Every war, every invention, every poem and plague and revolution, every birth and every death, all of it, compressed into light and sent into the dark. The council gave the data to their analysts. There were teams for each area: military, biological, cultural, technological. Each team was made up of the best minds their species had to offer. They were given 3 days to review the record and prepare their findings. Most of them thought 3 days was more than enough. Humans were a Class 9 species. How complicated could their history be? The military analyst was a Rithari named Sovereign. He was young for his kind, only 400 years old, with sharp facets in his crystal body that caught the light when he moved. He had reviewed the war records of over 30 species. He considered himself an expert. He opened the human file on the first morning and did not close it until the second night. The file was enormous, not in the way that a complicated thing is enormous. It was enormous in the way that an ocean is enormous. It just kept going, war after war after war, stretching back thousands of years to a time when humans still fought with sharpened metal and animals. Sovereign counted the conflicts. He stopped counting at 500, and he was not yet halfway through the timeline. But the numbers were not what disturbed him. What disturbed him was the pattern, or rather, the lack of one. Most species had war in their past. It was normal. Young civilizations fought over resources, territory, ideology. But eventually they grew out of it. They unified. They found peace, either through wisdom or exhaustion. The wars stopped. Human wars did not stop. They changed. They grew more complex, more creative, more terrible. Humans did not run out of reasons to fight. They invented new ones, and with each war, they learned. Their weapons grew more powerful. Their strategies grew more subtle. Their ability to organize violence on a massive scale became something that Sovereign could only describe as art. He paused on a section of the record labeled World War II. He read it 3 times. Then he closed the file, stood up, and walked to the window. He stood there for a long time, looking out at the stars, and said nothing. The biological analyst was a Keth named Palatha. The Keth were small, soft-furred beings with large dark eyes and gentle dispositions. They were scientists by nature. Palatha had studied the biology of over 200 species. She had never encountered anything that frightened her. She opened the human biological file on the first morning. By the first afternoon, she had requested that her findings be classified. The data was remarkable and terrible at the same time. Humans were, by galactic standards, physically unremarkable. They had no claws, no venom, no armor, no ability to regenerate lost limbs. They could not see in the dark. They could not breathe underwater. They could not survive in vacuum for more than a few seconds. On paper, they were one of the most fragile intelligent species ever recorded. But the paper was lying. Palatha read about the human immune system, a constant silent war fought inside every human body, every moment of every day. White blood cells that hunted and killed invaders with a ruthless efficiency that would have impressed the Velkori military. Fever responses that deliberately raised the body's temperature to burn out infection, even at the risk of damaging the host. The human body did not simply resist disease. It waged total war against it. She read about adrenaline, a chemical that the human body released in moments of danger. It increased strength. It increased speed. It reduced the ability to feel pain. It sharpened the senses. For a brief window, it turned an ordinary human into something significantly more dangerous. And they had no control over it. It simply happened, whether they wanted it or not. She read about bones. Human bones, when broken and healed, became stronger at the point of the break. She read that sentence 4 times to make sure the translation was correct. It was. Humans did not simply recover from damage. They became harder to damage in the same way again. Their bodies learned from injury. She read about something called persistence hunting. In the ancient past, before technology, humans had hunted prey not by being faster or stronger, but by simply following it, walking, for hours, for days sometimes. The prey would run, and the humans would walk after it. The prey would run again, and the humans would keep walking. Eventually, the prey would collapse from exhaustion. The humans would not. They were not the fastest or the strongest species on their world. They were simply the ones that never stopped. Palatha closed the file. She sat in her lab for a long time. Then she wrote a single sentence in her report. I recommend against making this species angry. The cultural analyst was a Dreneth, a being of living smoke, contained in a metal frame. Its name was unpronounceable in human language. It reviewed humanity's art, music, literature, philosophy, and social structures. It found things it expected: beauty, cruelty, creativity, contradiction. But it also found something it did not expect. It found love. Not the simple pair bonding that most species practiced. Humans loved in a way that was almost violent in its intensity. They loved their partners, their children, their friends, their pets, their nations, their ideas. They loved things that did not love them back. They loved things that hurt them. And when the things they loved were threatened, they became something else entirely. Something that did not stop, did not negotiate, did not sleep. The Drenith analyst made a note. Human aggression is not random. It is almost always linked to a protective instinct. They are most dangerous when they are defending something they love. On the third day, the analysts presented their findings to the council in a closed session. No press, no observers, just the delegates and the data. The room was very quiet when they finished. Commander Drell of the Valkyrie sat very still in his seat. He had spent his career fighting the Scythorak swarms, mindless biological weapons that consumed everything in their path. He had always considered them the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. He was no longer certain of that. A junior analyst, a young Valkyrie named Keth, had been assigned to compile a summary of the human record for the public archive. She had done her job well, perhaps too well. That evening, a single line from her summary was leaked to the Galactic Press Network. Within hours, it had been translated into every known language and was spreading across every settled world in the galaxy. The line was simple. It read, "They don't have natural weapons. They made their own. They never stopped making them." By the next morning, the council chamber was flooded with messages. Some demanded that the Protectorate be enacted immediately, not to protect humanity, but to protect everyone else. Others demanded that the motion be dropped entirely, arguing that placing restrictions on a species like this was not wise, but suicidal. Taesha Mwangi read the leaked line on her datapad while eating breakfast in her quarters. She took a sip of coffee. She smiled. The game was just beginning. The invitation went out on the fourth day. It was polite, brief, and addressed to every delegation in the council. Ambassador Taisha Mwangi cordially invited them to observe a routine training exercise aboard the human colony ship Argo Meridian. No weapons would be aimed at any guest. Refreshments would be provided. Comfortable shoes were recommended. 43 delegations accepted. The other 17 sent observers anyway, though they pretended not to. The Argo Meridian was docked at the far end of the station's commercial ring. It was not a warship. It was a colony vessel, built to carry 400 humans across deep space to establish a new settlement. It was big and square and ugly, all function and no beauty, with patches of mismatched hull plating where repairs had been made during the long voyage. Next to the sleek, polished ships of the Council species, it looked like a box someone had kicked down a hill. Commander Drell of the Valkyrie stood at the docking port and stared at it. He had commanded warships for 60 years. He knew what military discipline looked like, and he expected very little of it from a civilian transport. Taesha met the delegates at the airlock. She wore her gray uniform, her translator collar, and a small smile that gave nothing away. She led them through the ship's corridors, narrow metal hallways with exposed pipes and cables on the ceiling, painted in dull green and marked with numbers and arrows. The air smelled like machine oil and coffee and something Drell could not identify. Later, he would learn it was called sweat. "We train every week," Taesha said as she walked. "The crew rotates through emergency drills on a regular schedule. What you are about to see is not a special performance. It is a Tuesday." She brought them to an observation gallery above the main cargo bay, which had been cleared and converted into a training floor. The delegates took their seats behind a thick window of reinforced glass. Below them, the crew of the Argo Meridian went about their normal routines. Engineers checking equipment, medical staff sorting supplies, a group of Marines stretching and talking in low voices. Then, the alarm sounded. It was loud and sharp, a repeating tone that cut through the air like a blade. Red lights flashed along the corridors, and everything changed. The crew moved. Not slowly, not with confusion. They moved the way water moves when a dam breaks. Every person on that deck knew exactly where to go and what to do. Engineers ran to their stations. Medics grabbed their kits. Marines picked up their weapons and formed into teams of 4 with a speed that made Commander Drell lean forward in his seat. The simulation was a cascade failure, the worst kind of emergency a ship could face. The scenario began with a reactor malfunction. Warning lights turned from red to orange to white. 2 engineers dove into the reactor housing and began working, their hands moving in quick, practiced patterns. One of them burned her fingers on a hot conduit. She pulled her hand back, shook it once, and kept working. She did not stop. She did not cry out. She simply adjusted her grip and continued. Then the hull breach alarm sounded. A section of the cargo bay wall blew open. A controlled decompression, simulated but realistic enough that the air pressure in the room dropped, and the delegates felt their ears pop behind the glass. Emergency bulkheads slammed down. Crew members who were caught on the wrong side of the doors simply turned around and found another route. No one panicked. No one froze. Then came the boarding action. Training drones, small, fast machines designed to simulate hostile intruders, poured through the breach. The Marines moved to intercept. The delegates watched as 4-person teams cleared the corridors with a fluid, coordinated precision that was almost beautiful. They communicated in short, clipped phrases. They covered each other's movements without looking. They knew where their teammates were at all times, as if connected by invisible threads. A Keth delegate whispered to her aide, "They move like a hive mind." Her aide whispered back, "They are not a hive mind. That is the frightening part." In the medical bay, visible through a second observation window, a medic named Torres worked on a simulated casualty, a mannequin with fake wounds designed to bleed realistic-looking fluid. The deck beneath his feet was tilted at 15 degrees from the simulated structural damage. He braced himself against the wall with one knee and operated anyway. His hands were steady. His face was calm. He talked to the mannequin as he worked, calling it Buddy and telling it to hang in there. The Rithari delegate, Sovereign, watched the medic with an expression that his species reserved for moments of deep spiritual unease. The engineer with the burned hand, her name was Corporal Yuki Tanaka, finished her work on the reactor, and then moved, without being ordered, to the section of the ship where the Keth ambassador's escape pod was housed. She spent the next 20 minutes checking every seal, every connection, every backup system on that pod. She was not assigned to it. No one had asked her to do it. She simply decided that the Keth ambassador's survival mattered, and acted on that decision. The simulation lasted 45 minutes. 45 minutes of smoke, alarms, flashing lights, controlled chaos, and 400 humans working together like the parts of a single machine. When the all-clear sounded, the delegates sat in stunned silence. And then the humans did something the aliens did not expect. They laughed. The Marines were clapping each other on the shoulders. The engineers were trading jokes about the reactor alarm. Corporal Tanaka held up her burned hand and showed it to a friend, who winced and then laughed, and called her a name that the translator rendered as an insult, but which was clearly meant with love. The medic, Torres, checked the pulse on the mannequin's neck, looked up at his team, and said with a perfectly straight face, "He is going to make it." Everyone around him groaned and threw things at him. They were not shaken, they were not traumatized. They had just survived a scenario that would have broken the crew of most council ships, and they were laughing about it. They treated it the way a person might treat a game, difficult, tiring, but ultimately something to be enjoyed and then set aside. Speaker Zolvan had been watching from the back of the gallery. He had said nothing throughout the entire exercise. His crystalline body had gone very still, the light inside him dimming to a faint glow. Now he walked forward, slowly, until he stood beside Taesha at the glass. "Ambassador," he said. His voice was quieter than usual. "How do they remain so calm?" Taesha looked down at her crew. She watched Tanaka wrapping a bandage around her own hand, while telling a story that made 3 people laugh at once. She watched Torres put a blanket over his mannequin patient and pat it on the head. She watched the Marines disassemble their weapons, clean them, and reassemble them, while carrying on a conversation about what they were going to have for dinner. "Speaker," she said, "I told you, this was a Tuesday." Zolvan looked at her. The light inside him flickered. "What happens on the other days?" he asked. Taesha turned to him. Her expression was polite, pleasant, and completely unreadable. "Would you like to find out?" she said. He did not answer. He turned and walked out of the gallery. The other delegates followed in silence. As they filed through the airlock and back into the clean, polished corridors of Veluin Prime, none of them spoke. The Vilcori military attaché was the last to leave. He paused at the door and looked back at the observation window, where the humans were still cleaning up, still laughing, still entirely at ease. He thought about the Scythorak swarms. He thought about the last time he had fought them. The screaming, the chaos, the way his own crew had frozen in terror as the bioships latched onto the hull. These humans had faced something similar and called it practice. He left the ship and did not sleep that night. The next morning, a new message appeared on the Council's internal network. It was from the Valkyrie military delegation, and it was only 1 sentence long. "We recommend the Protectorate motion be withdrawn immediately." But it was too late for that. Events were already moving faster than anyone had expected, and the galaxy was about to learn that the difference between a training exercise and the real thing was not as large as they had hoped. The alarm that woke the station was not like the training alarm on the Argo Meridian. It was deeper, longer, and it did not repeat in a pattern. It was a single, continuous tone that meant one thing to every species on Veluin Prime. Something was coming, and it was not friendly. Taisha was in her quarters when the alarm began. She was reading a message from Earth, a note from her sister, asking how the food was in space. She put the datapad down, stood up, and walked to the nearest command terminal. Her hands were steady. Her heartbeat was elevated, but she had trained herself to notice that, without reacting to it. The terminal showed her everything she needed to know. A Scythorak swarm had entered the Veluin corridor. Not a small one. Not a scout group or a raiding party. This was a full swarm. Thousands of bioships, each one a living weapon, driven by a hive intelligence that knew nothing except hunger and expansion. It was the largest swarm detected in over 300 years, and it was heading directly for the Council station. Across Veluin Prime, panic was spreading. The Keth delegation had sealed themselves in their quarters and were transmitting distress calls on every frequency. The Drenith were trying to evacuate to their ships. The Rathari council members stood in their chambers, their crystal bodies flickering with stress patterns, issuing orders that no one was calm enough to follow. Even the Velkori, proud and disciplined as they were, looked shaken. Their defense fleet was 12 hours away. The swarm would arrive in 6. Speaker Zolvan stood in the council chamber, which was nearly empty now. Most delegates had fled to their ships or their sealed quarters. He stared at the tactical display, a holographic map of the corridor, showing the swarm as a moving cloud of red dots, growing larger with every passing minute. The cloud was so dense that individual bioships could not be distinguished. It looked like a bloodstain, spreading across the stars. He had lived for over 1,000 years. He had seen swarms before, smaller ones, in the outer reaches of Rathari space. He remembered the worlds they had consumed, stripped to bare rock, every living thing devoured. He remembered the silence that followed. He did not want to hear that silence again. Then a new signal appeared on the tactical display, a single blue dot, moving away from the station and toward the swarm. Zolvan stared at it. He checked the identification tag. It was the Argo Meridian. Taesha had not asked for permission. She had not requested authorization from the Council, or clearance from Station Command, or approval from the Valkyrie military. She had walked to the nearest communication panel, opened a channel to her ship, and spoken 3 words. Weapons free. Captain David Osei, the commanding officer of the Argo Meridian, had been awake for 2 minutes when the order came. He was still pulling on his boots. He did not ask questions. He did not hesitate. He hit the ship-wide alarm, and 400 humans went to war. The Argo Meridian was not a warship. It was a colony vessel. It carried mining equipment, agricultural supplies, prefabricated shelters, and enough food to feed 400 people for 2 years. Its weapons were limited. A handful of point defense cannons designed to shoot down small asteroids, and a single forward plasma lance that had been installed as an afterthought. Against a full Scytherok swarm, it was like throwing a stone at a tidal wave. But humans have been throwing stones at tidal waves for a very long time. The engineers moved first. Chief Engineer Yuki Tanaka, her burned hand still wrapped in bandages from the drill 2 days ago, led her team into the cargo bay. They had 40 mining drones, small, fast, remote-controlled machines designed to break apart asteroids for mineral extraction. In 22 minutes, Tanaka and her team reprogrammed every single one of them into kinetic interceptors. They stripped out the mining lasers and replaced them with the densest chunks of raw metal they could find in the cargo hold. Each drone became a guided missile, small and fast, and packed with enough mass to punch through the organic hull of a Scytherok bioship. The helm officer, Lieutenant Amara Diallo, plotted a course that put the Argo Meridian directly between the swarm and the station. She knew what that meant. Everyone on the bridge knew what that meant. No one said anything about it. Diallo entered the course, confirmed it, and locked it in. Captain Osei stood at the center of the bridge and watched the swarm grow on the main display. He was a quiet man from Accra, with gray at his temples and deep lines around his eyes. He had been a merchant captain for 20 years before volunteering for the colony program. He had never commanded a ship in combat. But he had read every after-action report from every human conflict in the last 200 years, because he believed that a captain who did not study war was a captain who would lose one. "All hands," he said into the ship-wide channel. "This is the captain. There is a Scytherok swarm approaching this station. The Council fleet is 12 hours out. We are 6 hours closer. We are going to buy them time." He paused. The ship was quiet. "I will not lie to you," he said. "This will be hard. Some of us may not come back. But there are 60 species on that station, and most of them have never seen a swarm up close. They are afraid. They do not know what to do. We do." He took a breath. "So let us show them." The swarm hit them like a wall of teeth. The first wave of bioships, each one a living thing the size of a shuttle, with a mouth full of bone-like projections and a body that could survive in vacuum, slammed into the Argo Meridian's forward shields. The shields held for 11 minutes. When they failed, the point defense cannons opened up, filling the space around the ship with a web of superheated plasma. Bioships burst apart in flashes of green and black. Tanaka launched the mining drones. 40 small machines streaked into the swarm at maximum speed. Each one hit a bioship and punched straight through it, the raw metal tearing through organic hull like a fist through paper. 40 bioships died in the first volley. It was not enough. There were thousands more behind them. They vented reactor plasma, superheated gas that was normally contained deep inside the ship's power core, through the cargo bay doors and into the swarm's approach path. The plasma created a wall of heat so intense that bioships that flew through it simply cooked. Their organic hulls blistered and split. The swarm recoiled, then adjusted its approach, coming in from the sides instead. And then the Marines went outside. Sergeant First Class Kwame Asante led a team of 12 in EVA suits, armored spacesuits designed for extravehicular activity. They carried shaped charges, small powerful explosives meant for demolition work on asteroid surfaces. They sealed their helmets, cycled through the airlock, and stepped out into open space. They could see the swarm. Not on a screen, not on a tactical display, they could see it with their own eyes, a living wall of dark shapes blotting out the stars. The bioships were close enough that the Marines could see the ridges on their hulls, the glow of their bioluminescent navigation organs, the slow opening and closing of their feeding mouths. Asante and his team used their suit thrusters to fly toward the forward bioships, the largest ones, the ones that seemed to direct the others. They landed on the hulls of living creatures in the vacuum of space, planted their charges, and pushed off. The explosions ripped the command bioships apart from the inside. The swarm shuddered. Its coordination faltered. Smaller bioships began crashing into each other, confused without their leaders. The battle lasted 4 hours. 4 hours of fire and silence, and the slow spinning of broken things in the dark. The Argo Meridian lost half its hull plating. 3 decks were open to vacuum. The plasma lance burned out after 2 hours of continuous fire. The point-defense cannons ran out of ammunition after 3. An engineer named Park was killed when a bulkhead collapsed. 2 Marines were struck by bioship debris during EVA. A medic named Torres, the same Torres who had joked about his mannequin patient 2 days ago, died when he refused to leave a wounded crewmate in a decompressing compartment. He sealed the compartment with himself inside, keeping pressure long enough for the rescue team to cut through the door. By the time they reached him, it was too late. But they held the line. When the Valkyrie fleet arrived, 12 hours late, every ship at maximum speed, they found the swarm broken and scattered. The Argo Meridian floated in the center of a field of dead bioships, battered and torn, but still alive, still broadcasting, still crewed by 384 humans who had not slept in 20 hours and were not yet willing to stop. The Valkyrie fleet commander, Admiral Korath, opened a channel to the Argo Meridian. He stared at the image on his screen. A battered bridge, cracked displays, a captain with blood on his face, standing upright, through what seemed to be willpower alone. Korath was silent for a long time. Then he spoke. "You were never the ones who needed protection, were you?" Captain Osei looked at the Admiral. He looked at his crew. He looked at the field of wreckage outside his broken windows. "No, Admiral," he said quietly. The council chamber had never been so full. Every seat was taken, every gallery was packed. Species that had not attended a full session in decades had sent their highest-ranking representatives. The press network was broadcasting to every settled world in the galaxy. Billions of beings were watching. The rooms still smelled faintly of smoke. The station had taken minor damage during the swarm's approach. A few exterior panels cracked, some power fluctuations on the lower decks. But the real damage was to the Council's pride. They had built Valuan Prime to be the safest place in the galaxy. They had surrounded it with the most advanced defense systems known to any species. And when the swarm had come, all of those systems had failed to matter, because the fleet was too far away and the politicians were too slow. A colony ship full of farmers and miners had saved them. The irony was not lost on anyone. Speaker Jolvan stood at the center of the platform. He looked older than he had a week ago. The stress fractures in his crystalline body, tiny cracks caused by the physical effects of extreme tension, had not yet healed. They ran across his arms and chest like veins of shadow in blue glass. When he moved, they caught the light and reminded everyone in the room that even the ancient Rathari could break. "The motion before this council," he began, and then he stopped. He looked down at the platform beneath his feet. He was quiet for a long moment. "The motion before this council is withdrawn," he said. "I withdraw it myself, Not by vote, not by procedure, by admission of error. A murmur moved through the chamber. Delegates leaned toward each other. Translators buzzed. We proposed this motion because we believed humanity was fragile, Jovan continued. We believed they were young, and soft, and unprepared. We believed the galaxy would break them, as it has broken so many others before. The light inside him flickered. We were wrong, not slightly wrong, not partially wrong, completely and profoundly wrong. He turned and looked at the place where the Valkyrie delegation sat. Commander Drell met his gaze and nodded once, slowly. The Protectorate motion is withdrawn, Jovan said again. Humanity does not need a guardian. The chamber erupted. Delegates spoke over each other. The press feeds lit up with commentary. But Jovan raised one crystalline hand, and the room fell silent again. However, he said, a question remains. If humanity does not need our protection, then what is our relationship to be? That question, I believe, belongs to Ambassador Mwangi. Every eye in the chamber turned to Taisha. She was sitting in the human delegation seat, the smallest seat in the chamber, tucked into the back row, assigned to her because humanity was the newest and least important species in the council. She had a bandage on her left arm from a cut she had received during the battle, when a falling panel had struck her on the bridge of the Argo Meridian. She had refused medical treatment until every injured crew member had been seen first. She stood up. She walked down to the central platform. Her boots made the same sharp sound on the metal floor that they had made on the first day, when she had asked her question. But something was different now. A week ago, the delegates had watched her with curiosity and condescension. Now they watched her with something closer to respect. And in some cases, something closer to fear. She reached the platform and stood where the speaker had stood. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every delegation, one by one. The Ritharii, the Valkyrie, the Keth, whose ambassador had learned that a human engineer with burned hands had spent the battle protecting her escape pod instead of her own ship. The dozens of others. She took her time. Then she began to speak. 4 days ago, I watched 16 members of my crew die, she said. Her voice was steady, but it was not cold. It was the voice of a person who had decided to feel everything and hide nothing. I want to tell you their names. She told them. All 16. She spoke each name clearly and slowly, and the translators carried each one into 60 languages. Private First Class James Okoro, Petty Officer Una Park, Corporal Dante Reyes, Hospital Corpsman Second Class Miguel Torres. She said every name, and after each one, she paused, and the chamber was silent. When she finished, she looked up. Those people did not die because they were ordered to, she said. They died because they chose to. Torres sealed himself in a decompressing compartment because his friend was inside. Park stayed at her post because the reactor would have gone critical if she left. Okoro carried a wounded Keth technician to the escape pod, and went back for another one, and did not make it out in time. She let that settle. You have read our record, she said. You know what we are. You know about our wars. You know about our weapons. You know that we are persistent and creative and very, very difficult to kill. Commander Drell told me on the first day that we are soft creatures from a small world. He was right about the small world. He was wrong about the rest. Drell, sitting in the Valkyrie section, did not move. His forearms were folded across his chest. His face showed nothing, but he did not look away. But here is what your record does not tell you, Taisha said. Here is the part that the analysts missed, because they were looking at the wars and the weapons and the adrenaline and the bones that heal stronger. They missed the reason behind all of it. The chamber was absolutely still. Humans are not dangerous because we are strong, she said. We are dangerous because we care. Every war we ever fought, every single one, started because someone threatened something a human loved. Our children, our homes, our freedom, our friends. We did not build weapons because we enjoyed destruction. We built them because the universe kept trying to take things from us, and we refused to let it. She took a breath. And that is why we came here. Not to conquer, not to prove ourselves, not to impress you. We came because we spent 10,000 years looking up at the stars and wondering if anyone else was out there. We sent radio signals into the dark and waited for an answer. We built telescopes and satellites and probes, and we pointed them at the sky, and we listened. For centuries, we listened, and we heard nothing. Her voice did not break, but it changed. It became quieter, and the chamber leaned in to hear her. "Do you know what that silence did to us?" she said. "Do you know what it is like to be alone? Not alone in a room or alone in a city, alone in the universe. To look up at a sky full of stars and know, or believe, that not a single one of them has anyone looking back." She shook her head. "That is the thing you do not understand about humans. We are not afraid of the swarms. We are not afraid of the dark. We are not afraid of dying. We are afraid of being alone. That is the fear that drives everything we do. Every ship we build, every signal we send, every hand we reach out, it is all the same question, asked over and over again, since the first human looked up at the night sky. Is anyone there? She looked around the chamber one final time. "You asked if we needed protection," she said. "I asked, from whom? I will give you the answer now." She paused. "From loneliness, from the silence between the stars, from the fear that we were the only ones who looked up at the night sky and ached to hear a voice that was not our own." She straightened her back. "You are not our protectors," she said. "You are not our subjects. You are not our enemies. You are the answer to the oldest prayer humanity has ever spoken, the prayer that we are not alone in the dark." The chamber was silent, not the confused silence of the first day, or the stunned silence after the training exercise. This was something else. This was the silence of understanding, of recognition, of 60 species realizing all at once that the small, soft, impossible creatures from the third planet of a minor star had crossed the void between worlds, not as conquerors or survivors, but as children, knocking on a door, hoping someone would open it. Speaker Jolvan was the first to stand. The cracks in his crystal body caught the light as he rose to his full height. He said nothing. He simply stood. Commander Drell stood next. Then the Keth ambassador, her dark eyes wet with something that her species did not have a word for. Then the Drenith, their smoke bodies rising inside their metal frames. One by one, every delegation in the chamber stood. Some of them did not know why they were standing. They stood anyway. Jolvan spoke. His voice filled the chamber. "The protectorate motion is dissolved," he said. "In its place, this council offers humanity what no Class 9 species has ever received. Full membership, effective immediately, with all rights, all responsibilities, and all the friendship that this body can offer." He looked at Taisha. "Welcome home, Ambassador." Taisha closed her eyes, just for a moment, just long enough to feel the weight of the words settle into her chest, into her bones, into the place where the loneliness had lived for so long. Then she opened her eyes, and she smiled. "Thank you, Speaker," she said. "On behalf of humanity, all 8 billion of us, I accept." Somewhere, docked at the far end of the station, the Argo Meridian floated in the dark. Its hull was torn, its shields were gone. 3 of its decks were open to the vacuum of space. 16 of its crew would never come home. But 384 of them were still alive. And when the news reached them, carried through the ship's battered communication system in a burst of static and light. They did what humans always do. They cheered, they hugged each other, they cried, they laughed. Corporal Yuki Tanaka, her burned hands still wrapped in bandages, sat on the floor of the engine room and put her head in her hands and wept. Not from sadness, not from relief. From something bigger than both, the feeling of a door opening after a very long time, and warm light spilling through. They were not alone anymore. None of them were.